An 11-year-old black girl had her boarding pass torn in half, right at the gate, without a single question asked. What the agent didn't know? That little girl's mother owned the entire airline, and she was watching from just a few rows behind. Before we dive in, let us know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Maren Callister stood at the kitchen counter, peeling a clementine with steady fingers. Outside their apartment window, Harlem was just beginning to stir. Street vendors setting up, buses exhaling at the corner, a delivery truck reversing with that slow, measured beep. The morning light slanted through the curtains, making everything in the kitchen look softer, quieter than it really was. At the table, Nia sat cross-legged on the dining chair, swinging her socked feet just above the floor. Her cereal was mostly milk now, Cheerios bobbing lazily. She wasn't eating much, just poking at the bowl with her spoon, her eyes darting from her mom's face to the worn-out duffel bag resting by the door. "You packed the peanut butter sandwich?" she asked. Maren nodded. "Wrapped it tight, bottom of the front pocket, just like we practiced." Nia gave a small nod, then looked away, tapping the edge of the bowl. She didn't want to seem nervous, but her fingers betrayed her, drumming a little rhythm that didn't match her usual calm. Maren didn't press. She handed Nia the last wedge of clementine and slid into the seat across from her. "You braided your own hair better than I could have," she said gently. "Those beads are tight." Nia smiled at that. "I picked purple for bravery," Maren chuckled. "Then you picked right." There was something quiet in the room after that, comfortable, but weighty. Today wasn't just any day. It was the first time Nia would be flying alone. Not across the street, not a sleepover. This was a full flight to Vermont for summer camp. Camp Riverpine. 2 weeks. Trees, art tents, cabins with names like Blue Jay and Maple. Maren had made sure everything was arranged. The unaccompanied minor forms, the TSA escort, the confirmation emails, the little card with emergency numbers tucked inside Nia's backpack. But still, it was her first flight without her. Maren reached into the drawer and pulled out a small folded note. She slid it across the table without saying much. Nia picked it up, opened it, and read quietly. "Look out the window, sweet girl. The clouds don't judge. They just carry you." Nia blinked slowly. "You wrote that this morning?" Maren nodded. "Just after you braided your hair." They sat in that moment for a while, two people trying not to say too much because too much would unravel them. The kind of goodbye that isn't just about parting, but about letting go in tiny pieces. At exactly 7:30, Maren zipped up the duffel and grabbed her own small carry-on bag. Nia noticed it wasn't her usual briefcase. No name tag, no embroidered company logo. "You're really flying too?" Nia asked. "Yep," Maren said casually. "Different row, though. I'll be somewhere behind you. I have a window seat, too." Nia squinted. "You never take window seats." "I know, today felt different." Maren had planned it carefully. She had booked herself on the same flight under a pseudonym, just initials. No one would recognize her as the CEO of Verta Air. She wasn't flying today as the woman in charge. She was flying as a mother who needed to see something for herself. The reports had been subtle, emails from concerned employees, anonymous complaints about Gate G9 at LaGuardia, small comments about a certain gate agent who made certain passengers feel unwelcome. Nothing overt, nothing she could act on officially, but still, it gnawed at her. So today she would board like any other passenger, no special announcement, no press suit. She wore jeans, a plain gray sweater, and her hair in a soft bun. No one looked twice. As they waited for the car to the airport, Nia adjusted the straps on her purple backpack. A charm shaped like a cloud hung from the zipper. She'd made it in art class and told her mom it was for luck. "Ready?" Maren asked as they stood at the elevator. Nia hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "I think so." "Good," Maren said, offering her hand. "But just in case, purple means bravery, right?" Nia took her mother's hand and gave it a squeeze. "Right." They didn't say much in the car. The city slid by in streaks of yellow cabs in early sunlight, and Nia pressed her forehead to the glass, watching people on sidewalks with their own places to go. A part of her liked that, being one of many, just a kid going to camp. But another part of her, deep down, felt something else. Not fear exactly, but an uneasiness she couldn't name. Like she was carrying something invisible that someone might try to take from her. When they reached the terminal, Marin walked Nia through security and signed the last of the forms. The airline escort would meet her at the gate. Marin kissed her daughter's cheek and whispered, "You got this." Nia nodded, her lips pressed into a determined line. As the two separated, Marin disappearing into the line for boarding group A and Nia heading toward gate G9, neither looked back. Not because they didn't want to, but because they both knew the real strength was in the going. And just like that, the first flight began, not with wheels lifting off the ground, but with two hands letting go. The floor under gate G9 had that dull, speckled pattern that made it hard to tell if it was clean or just worn down from years of feet and rolling suitcases. The chairs lining the wall were mostly full, families with strollers, business travelers in slacks with earbuds in, the occasional teenager scrolling on their phones. Nia stood near the window, sneakers barely brushing the yellow boarding line taped to the floor. Her purple backpack hung neatly on her shoulders. She checked the screen overhead again. Flight 4817 to Burlington on time. Just like the paper said. Just like her mom had shown her the night before. Twice. The boarding pass was in her hand, printed in black and white with her name, seat number, and all the official markings. She'd folded it once, neatly, the way Marin had shown her. She held it out now like a ticket to something sacred. The line moved forward, slow and steady. When it was her turn, Nia stepped up, smiled the way she practiced, and extended the boarding pass with both hands. Behind the counter stood a woman with pale skin, maybe in her mid-50s. Her name tag read J. Holbrook. Her silver blonde hair was tucked tightly behind her ears, and her lips moved like she was chewing invisible gum. She glanced up but didn't smile. "You here with someone?" she asked, her voice clipped. "No, ma'am," Nia said softly. "I'm flying by myself. My mom checked me in this morning." Holbrook glanced at the paper but didn't scan it. Her eyes flicked up again, slow and assessing. "You sure this is the right gate, sweetie?" "Yes, ma'am. Flight 4817 to Burlington." There was a pause, a silence that lasted just half a second too long. Holbrook didn't scan the boarding pass. She just held it, tilted it, and looked at it like it might bleed through her fingers. Then she gave a little exhale through her nose, short, almost amused. "You can't just print something from the internet and think you're getting on a plane, sweetheart," she said. Nia blinked. "It's real. My name's on the list. I have the email." "I've seen this before," Holbrook cut in. "Kids trying to sneak on. You'd be surprised what people try to pull." Nia's voice dropped. "Some of who?" The agent finally looked her in the eye, and the smile that had been hovering at the edge of her mouth disappeared altogether. "I'm going to hold on to this," she said. Without another word, she tore the boarding pass clean in half. Right down the middle. Nia gasped. A couple standing behind her in line shifted uncomfortably. One man in a Delta cap glanced over, then looked away. No one said a word. "There," Holbrook said, dropping the torn paper in the trash. "Now have a seat, and someone will come to sort this out." "I didn't do anything wrong," Nia said, barely above a whisper. "You're making a scene," Holbrook snapped. "Don't be dramatic." Nia turned slowly, trying to find someone, anyone, who might look her way. But eyes slid past her like rain down a windshield. Even the TSA agent posted a few feet away didn't seem to notice. Holbrook raised her voice. "TSA, please. We've got a situation." The young male attendant, a few steps behind the counter, Jalen Monroe, tall and soft-spoken, froze. He looked between Nia and Holbrook, visibly uncomfortable. "I checked her in," he said gently. "She's on the list." It all matched. Holbrook gave him a look like he'd stepped out of line. "Did you verify her ID?" "She's 11. She doesn't have one." "She doesn't look 11, Holbrook said sharply. Jalen blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Holbrook didn't answer. She crossed her arms, lips pressed into a hard line. Nia reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the note her mom had written. She didn't read it. She just held it in her palm, folded tightly, like a small anchor in rough water. A TSA officer approached, sunglasses still on indoors, gum snapping between his molars. "What's going on here?" Possible fake boarding pass, Holbrook said before anyone else could speak. No guardian. Child is unaccompanied and uncooperative. I'm not, Nia whispered, her hand now clenched around the note. The officer squatted slightly to Nia's level. Your name? Nia Callister. He tapped something into his tablet. His brow furrowed, then slowly relaxed. His eyes shifted up toward Holbrook. She's on the manifest, registered under unaccompanied minor service. First class. Checked in this morning. Holbrook's shoulders stiffened. That can't be right. It is, the officer replied. Boarding pass was valid, shouldn't have been torn. Jalen stepped closer, arms folded. She followed protocol. I remember her. She had a sketch pad sticking out of her backpack. Nia hadn't said a word in minutes. She just stared straight ahead now, eyes wide, hands still wrapped around the crumpled note. The space around her felt thinner somehow, not quieter, just heavier. And then, from beyond the security rope, a calm, clear voice. Is there a reason my daughter isn't on that plane? The room shifted. A rustle passed through the gate like wind in tall grass. Maren Callister walked forward. No heels, no power suit, just sneakers, jeans, and a denim jacket. Her expression wasn't angry. It was colder than that. Colder and far more dangerous. Holbrook straightened. I wasn't told. You weren't supposed to be, Maren replied. I boarded early for a reason. I wanted to see how she'd be treated when no one was watching. Nia stepped toward her mother, the tears she'd been holding back finally spilling over. She said my ticket was fake, Nia said. She said people like me make things up. Maren didn't flinch. She looked at Holbrook and asked softly but firmly, Did you scan her name? No, but did you check the manifest? I didn't think I needed to. Maren's voice remained level. You didn't think. You assumed. The gate grew very still. Behind them, a woman stood up slowly. I saw the whole thing. That little girl did nothing wrong. She waited in line. She was polite. She never raised her voice. Holbrook's face flushed deep red. I didn't know who she was, she said quietly. That's the problem, Maren replied. It shouldn't matter who she is. The TSA agent crossed his arms. Ma'am, we'll be filing a full report. Nia opened her hand at last, revealing the folded note, creased now, damp in places, but still intact. Her mom reached for it gently, her fingers brushing Nia's. We'll get another ticket, she said, but Nia shook her head. She looked at me like I didn't belong. I know, baby. She said I didn't look 11. Maren's eyes narrowed. And I'll be handling this. She turned slightly, her hand resting lightly on her daughter's shoulder, as the eyes of the terminal watched, not with whispers this time, but with held breath. Nia sat quietly in one of the stiff blue chairs near gate G9, her legs pulled up slightly and arms wrapped tight around her backpack. She hadn't said much since the crowd thinned. Her eyes were still red, though she wasn't crying anymore, just staring straight ahead, like she wasn't sure where she was supposed to look anymore. Maren stood a few feet away, speaking in low tones with the TSA officer and the younger gate agent, Jalen Monroe. She kept her voice even, but there was steel in it, a kind of calm that only came from holding back something sharper. Holbrook was nowhere in sight. She'd retreated through the side door, muttering something about calling a supervisor. No one had followed her. Nia shifted slightly in her seat and pulled out her sketch pad. She didn't draw, not yet, just held it on her lap, flipping through the pages slowly. Mountains, birds, a girl under an umbrella, all things she used to draw when the world felt safe. Now the page in front of her felt too white, too empty. Across from her, the man in the Delta cap, who'd looked away when Holbrook tore the ticket, glanced at her, then looked down quickly. Like he felt it now, too. The weight of not saying something. Jalen came over and crouched beside her. Hey, he said softly. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have stepped in sooner. Nia looked at him for a moment, then back at her sketch pad. Her voice was small. It's not your fault. He let out a slow breath. Still, you were respectful. You stood in line. You handed her your ticket just like everybody else. She didn't even look. That's not okay. Nia didn't respond. She turned a page. Another drawing, this one of a long hallway, empty, with doors on either side. No people. Just silence. Jalen glanced toward Marin. Your mom's a powerhouse. I didn't even know she was flying today. Nia's fingers tightened around the sketchpad. She didn't come as a boss today. She came as my mom. He nodded. That makes sense. Just then, the airport supervisor arrived. He moved with purpose, a man used to stepping into problems late but fixing them fast. His badge read Victor Sosa, Terminal Ops. He introduced himself to Marin with a firm handshake, then gestured toward a nearby desk for privacy. She followed him without hesitation. Nia watched them from her seat. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could tell her mother was doing what she always did, making people listen without yelling, making them uncomfortable with the truth, not with volume. Back at her seat, Nia looked down at her shoes. The laces were tied perfectly. She always double-knotted them, mom's rule. A part of her wanted to untie them now, just to feel like she had control over something. The overhead speaker called for a different flight to begin boarding. A few feet away, Jalen was tapping into his handheld device, probably checking updates. He looked over and offered her a small nod. It was something, not everything, but something. When Marin returned, she knelt beside her daughter, brushing one curl from her forehead. Are you okay to fly? She asked gently. Nia hesitated, then nodded. She started, then stopped. Her throat tightened. I didn't like how she looked at me, like I was trying to trick her, like I wasn't supposed to be here. Marin rested her hand over Nia's. She looked at you and saw her fear, not your truth. That's her limitation, not yours. For a moment, they sat there like that, side by side. No big declarations, no heroic music. Just a mother and daughter holding on to each other in the middle of an airport terminal that suddenly felt too loud, too cold. Then the intercom buzzed again. Passenger Nia Callister, please return to gate G9 for reboarding. Jalen stepped forward. He had a fresh boarding pass in hand. First class, he said with a soft smile. Window seat, like your mom planned. Marin accepted the ticket without ceremony. Upgrades don't fix what was broken, she said quietly. What fixes it is remembering. Next time you see a kid standing alone, check your bias before you check their ticket. Jalen nodded slowly. I will. As Nia rose and followed him toward the jet bridge, Marin watched. Her hand hovered near her phone, not to record but to remember. Every detail, every face, every silence that had screamed too loud. Nia turned just once before boarding. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just met her mother's eyes, and in that gaze was everything they couldn't say out loud. And then she was gone, down the tunnel, toward the plane, towards something she hadn't asked for, but was now hers to carry. The jet bridge was cooler than Nia expected, and the hum of the aircraft waiting at the end of it made the whole thing feel like standing on the edge of something big. She held her new boarding pass tighter this time, not because she thought someone might take it, but because it was hers, and she wasn't letting go. A flight attendant with a warm smile met her just inside the cabin. She had kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun. Her voice was low and soft when she said, Welcome aboard, Miss Callister. The captain asked if you'd like to say hi before takeoff. Nia blinked. Me? The woman nodded. He heard about what happened. He's a fan of your mom. For a second, Nia hesitated. She wasn't used to being seen this way. Acknowledged, invited. But then she gave a small nod and followed her down the narrow aisle to the cockpit. Captain Whitmore was older than she expected. Broad-shouldered, white beard trimmed neatly, aviator sunglasses resting on the dash in front of him. He turned and smiled, a little weathered but genuine. You must be Nia, he said. Heard you had quite a morning. She shrugged, unsure what to say. He pointed to the jump seat just inside the cockpit. You're welcome to sit a second if you like. It's a good view. Nia eased into the seat. The window stretched wide, and outside she could see the terminal glass glinting in the sun, her mom's silhouette still visible beyond the window. I never sat up here before, she said quietly. Well, now you have, he smiled. Some folks work their whole lives to see what you're seeing. Not a bad view for a kid with purple beads. Nia smiled faintly. Captain Whitmore leaned back in his seat. I've flown for 35 years, but you know what's harder than flying? She shook her head. Seeing people clearly, especially when the world teaches you to look away. That sat in the air between them. Not heavy, just honest. After a moment, he said, "You've got a good mom. She doesn't just fly the airline. She's trying to change how we treat people before they even step on board." Nia looked down at the card in her hand. The note her mom had written was still folded inside the sleeve of her sketch pad. Safe. "I just want people to stop assuming," she said, not really knowing if he'd understand. "Like, if I print my ticket at home, why do they think I'm lying?" He nodded slowly. "Because sometimes folks are trained to trust the wrong things. What's broken isn't always obvious, but it's there. The hard part is fixing what people think is normal." He reached into the side of his seat and pulled out a laminated map. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "Our flight path. Keep it. Mark where we've been. Helps you remember the journey." As she stepped out of the cockpit, the cabin had filled with passengers. Some glanced her way, but most were busy settling in, tucking bags into overhead bins, adjusting seat belts, swiping through their phones. Nia found her seat, 2A window like Mom said. She sat down, placed her backpack at her feet, and ran her fingers along the edge of the seatbelt. Out the window, the runway shimmered in the heat, and the world felt like it was tilting gently toward motion. Back at the terminal, Marin remained by the glass, arms crossed lightly, eyes fixed on the plane. She hadn't moved, hadn't picked up her phone. She just stood there watching. Not the plane itself, but the gate, the very spot where her daughter had been questioned, doubted, dismissed. Behind her, Victor Sosa approached, holding a small folder in hand. "We'll be reviewing the surveillance," he said, voice low. "There'll be a full report, audio included." Marin nodded but didn't turn around. "I want every gate agent retrained, and not with some outdated slideshow about customer service. I want them to understand what it means to look at a child and not see a threat." Victor paused. "You want this filed as an internal violation?" "No," Marin said. "I want it filed as the beginning of a reckoning." He glanced at the folder. "Holbrook's off the schedule indefinitely. She'll need more than time off." Victor didn't argue. Inside the aircraft, the doors sealed. Nia leaned against the window, sketchpad open again. She wasn't drawing the captain, not the cockpit either. She was drawing a hallway, long, narrow, and bright. At the end was a door. Behind it, a silhouette of a small girl, waiting. Above the door, she wrote 3 words in neat block letters. "Do better." Outside, the plane pushed back, and the ground slowly gave way to sky. The clouds rose up gently to meet them, soft, steady, and for the first time all morning, without judgment. The meeting room at Terminal Operations wasn't built for comfort. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, and the chairs creaked when you shifted too much. Marin didn't mind. She hadn't come for comfort. She'd come for accountability. Victor Sosa sat at the end of the table, tablet in hand, posture straight. To his left, Jalen Monroe had been asked to stay. Across from them sat Holbrook, Janice now because titles no longer protected her. Janice didn't speak first. She kept her hands folded in her lap, fingers wrapped too tightly around each other. Her blazer was gone, replaced with a pale cardigan, and her pearl earrings were missing. Without them, she looked smaller. Victor cleared his throat. "We've reviewed the incident and the footage, including audio." Janice nodded stiffly. "I understand." Marin didn't look at her. Not yet. Jalen spoke up. She was calm, Nia, polite, clear. There wasn't a moment where she was aggressive or out of line. "I know," Janice said quietly. Her voice had none of the sharpness from earlier. You just what?" Marin turned toward her now, her tone even but cutting. "Didn't see her? Or didn't want to?" Janice opened her mouth and shut it again. Her jaw worked slightly, like something behind her teeth was too hard to chew. She finally said, "I've been at that gate for almost 20 years. I've seen all kinds of things. Fake tickets, kids trying to sneak on, adults coaching them. I guess," she trailed off. "You guess you stopped seeing them as individuals?" Marin asked. "Just categories?" Janice blinked fast. "She reminded me of a girl from 2 years ago. Different name, different city, but same look, same situation. That one turned out to be fake. I overcorrected." "You didn't overcorrect," Marin said. "You overassumed." Victor remained quiet, watching, letting the space stretch. "I've made mistakes," Janice said finally, But I didn't mean to. Not meaning to, Marin cut in, doesn't undo what it felt like for my daughter to be treated like a criminal in front of strangers. She didn't ask to be exceptional. She just asked to be seen. Janice's eyes flicked to the tabletop. She didn't defend herself, maybe because there was nothing left to defend. Victor spoke then. Janice, there will be consequences. This wasn't a clerical error. It was a human failure. You'll be removed from gate duty for the foreseeable future. HR will assign a reassessment program, including bias training and observational review. We'll be logging this as a formal infraction. Janice nodded once, her shoulders slumping a little. And I want her, Marin added, to sit through the new onboarding I'm redesigning, front to back. No skipping modules, no exemptions for tenure. Victor looked at Janice, then back at Marin. Approved. Silence again. But this one felt different. Not empty, just still. Marin stood. I didn't come here to get her fired. Janice looked up, surprised. I came here to find out if she understands what she did, Marin continued. Because the next time a little girl walks up to her desk, I want her to remember today. Janice swallowed, hard. I will. Marin gave a small nod, then turned to Jalen. Thank you, she said quietly. You spoke when others didn't. Jalen looked down, a little embarrassed. I should have spoken sooner. You did speak, Marin said. That's more than most. She walked out of the room without shaking hands or making dramatic exits. Some moments don't ask for closure. They ask for change. The airport coffee shop was quiet for once, tucked just past the security checkpoint near the side of Terminal D. Marin sat alone at a corner table with a steaming cup of tea in front of her, untouched. Her phone buzzed beside it, lit up with back-to-back emails from Verta Air's communications team, PR advisors, board members. Everyone had something to say now. They wanted statements, apologies, damage control. She reached for her laptop, opened it, and stared at the screen. A blank document blinked back at her. She was supposed to be drafting a message to the public, something polished and cautious, something that said, "We're aware of the incident," without saying anything at all. But before her fingers touched the keys, a new email came in. No subject line, no signature, just a sentence. You may want to remember how you got that seat. Attached was a photo. Marin's breath caught in her throat as she clicked. It was her, 18 years younger, sitting in a boardroom of an airline long since merged into Verta Air. She remembered the day. She'd just been promoted to Regional Operations Director, the only black woman in the room, the only person under 40. She remembered what she'd worn, a navy blazer, heels that pinched, and the smile she gave the camera that day. Cautious, measured. There'd been whispers even then, about how she got there, about who she might have had to please, about whether she'd been moved up to make the board look good. Marin stared at the photo. Alongside it was a second image, an internal document from that same airline. A note about a recruitment directive, marked confidential. It referenced strategic diversity placements. The message was clear. If she kept pushing this incident, if she kept speaking out about systemic issues, someone would make sure the story shifted to her. She closed the email slowly. No reply, no reaction. Just sat there, breathing. A shadow passed her table. Jalen Monroe. I saw you come in, he said, motioning toward the empty chair across from her. Mind if I sit? Marin nodded. Jalen glanced at the tea. You didn't drink that. Haven't decided if I want to. He waited a moment, then asked, Something happened? She thought about lying, about brushing it off. Instead, she turned the laptop toward him and let him see the message. He read it twice. His mouth tightened. You know this means they're scared, right? He said. They wouldn't be digging up your past if you weren't threatening their future. Marin let out a soft laugh. It wasn't amused. It was tired. They're right in a way, she said. I did accept that promotion quietly. I didn't question the system. I didn't demand a change. I was just grateful to be there. Jalen looked at her carefully. And now? Now I know that being grateful for a broken seat doesn't fix the plane. He nodded. So what are you going to do? She leaned back, looked out the window where the edge of a taxiing plane disappeared beyond view. I'm going to build something better, she said, even if I have to start from the wreckage. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from her assistant. Press is asking for a quote. Want me to draft something neutral? Marin stared at the screen, then opened a new document. Not for the press, not for optics. This one was for real. At the top, she typed, Phase 1, humanize the gate. Then she started writing, not as a CEO, not as someone covering liability, but as a mother, as a passenger, as a woman who'd once been 12 and told she didn't belong, and who now had a daughter who'd heard the same thing. Jalen stood to leave but paused. For what it's worth, he said, I think it's about time someone made them look again. She nodded, and for the first time since the gate incident, Marin reached for her tea and took a sip. Still warm. The seat in 2A wasn't as big as Nia imagined, but it felt important. Her backpack was tucked under the seat in front of her, and her sketch pad rested in her lap. The plane was already humming with quiet movement. Passengers settling in, flight attendants checking latches, the click of overhead bins shutting one by one. She looked out the window. The tarmac below shimmered slightly in the summer heat. Somewhere beyond the glass and steel of the terminal, she knew her mom was still nearby. Not watching the plane exactly. More like keeping watch over the silence that had almost swallowed her earlier that morning. The flight attendant who'd greeted her came by and knelt beside her seat. The captain says you're welcome to visit the cockpit if you want. He's a softie for first-time flyers. Nia blinked. He knows it's my first flight? The woman smiled. He knows more than that, sweetheart. With a small nod, Nia followed her up the aisle. The cockpit wasn't as spacious as she imagined. It was full of buttons, blinking lights, and soft voices from radios speaking in half-coded phrases. But the man in the left seat, the captain, smiled the way teachers smile when they're not trying too hard. He turned and extended his hand. You must be Nia. I'm Captain Doug Whitmore. Heard today's been a lot. Nia shook his hand quietly. He motioned toward the jump seat. You can sit for a minute if you like. This view's hard to beat. She lowered herself carefully. The window beside her stretched wider than the one in her row. Out there, the sun was hitting the edge of the wing, and everything looked cleaner somehow, like the sky was wiping off the mess of the ground. Captain Whitmore watched her a moment, then said, You know, I've been flying for more than 30 years. You'd think I'd be tired of clouds by now. Nia looked at him sideways. Are you? He shook his head. Not even close. You see enough clouds and you start realizing they're all different. Kind of like people. She didn't say anything, just held on to that thought for a second longer than she meant to. He leaned back. Your mom's quite a woman. I flew one of her first Verta routes back when she was still mapping things out on paper napkins. Now look at her. Nia traced her finger along the edge of the laminated map he handed her. She came today to see if I'd be treated right, she said, her voice quiet. She didn't want to step in unless she had to. That's what real leadership looks like, he replied, not needing to be seen, but standing up the second someone else's dignity is on the line. There was something about the way he said that. Not grand, not rehearsed, just a truth he'd carried for a while. Some people think they have to earn respect with a badge or a title, he added, but most of the time, you earn it by how you treat someone you don't know, who can't give you anything. Nia looked down at the map again. That's not what she got today. He nodded slowly. Not yet, but maybe next time someone sees you standing at a gate, they'll think twice. As she stood to leave, he handed her a small pin, a silver pair of wings. From one traveler to another, he said. She pinned it to the strap of her backpack without a word, then walked quietly back to her seat. Outside the window, the plane rolled back from the gate. The terminal got smaller. The ground crew gave lazy waves. The sky ahead looked wide and patient. She didn't draw right away. Instead, she pulled the folded note from her pocket again, the one her mom wrote. She didn't need to read it. She already knew what it said. But she held it anyway, the way people hold on to things that don't change even when everything else does. And then, as the engines roared and the nose of the aircraft lifted, she looked out across the clouds. They didn't look back. They just carried her. Back on the ground, Marin was back in motion, but only just. The hum of the terminal had faded behind her as she stepped into one of the small conference rooms reserved for executive use. The kind with too clean air and soulless carpeting. She set her laptop down, her shoulders still stiff from the morning storm. She should have been preparing for a strategy call, one of many in the wake of the gate incident. But instead, she stared at her inbox. Messages stacked one over the other. Media requests, internal memos, a few supportive notes from team leads she didn't know well. She scrolled mechanically until her eyes landed on something different. Subject line? None. Sender? Blocked. Her heart didn't skip. It paused. She clicked. There was only one sentence. You may want to remember how you got that seat. Attached was a photo. And this time, it wasn't of Nia. It was of her. Marin in her late 20s, seated in the corner of a long glass-walled conference room. Her hair pulled tight, her blazer a little too formal. She remembered the meeting, her first big one after being promoted to regional director at Atlantic West, a predecessor to Verta Air. She hadn't spoken much that day, just nodded at the right times, scribbled notes too furiously, and smiled in that polite, uncertain way women of color sometimes learn to survive with. It wasn't the photo that made her jaw tighten. It was the second attachment, a scan of an internal memo marked confidential. Strategic diversity placement recommendations. Internal use only. The lines were clinical, detached. Her name wasn't on it, but the timing matched and the suggestion was clear. Push certain optics-friendly candidates into visible positions to satisfy external pressure. A message beneath the message. You didn't earn it. You were given it. Be careful how loud you get. Marin leaned back, hands folded on her lap. She didn't feel fear. Not exactly. It was something colder than that. A quiet, familiar burn. She'd been here before. Different players. Same game. A knock broke the silence. It was Jalen Monroe. He stepped inside, looked at her face, then at the laptop screen. She turned it toward him. Let him read. His jaw clenched. They're not even subtle about it, he muttered. You expose one gate agent's bias, and suddenly they're digging up ways to stain your name. They want me to question myself, Marin said. Make me ask if I'm still standing on something solid, or if it's just been a spotlight all along. Jalen sat across from her, speaking slowly, carefully. I think you already know the answer. She exhaled. I do. I just remember how badly I needed that seat back then. I swallowed a lot to get there. You didn't owe them silence to keep it. Marin looked out the window toward the runways, the place where ground met sky. She thought about Nia, up there somewhere, drawing, maybe looking down at the city without knowing her mother was facing ghosts on the ground. She's flying right now, she said. I told her the clouds don't judge. Jalen smiled. I bet they don't. They sat in silence for a while, not uncomfortable, just full. Then Marin reached for her laptop, not to respond to the threat, not to report it. She opened a fresh document and typed in the header. Phase 1, humanize the gate. Jalen leaned in, watching her fingers move. What is that? He asked. It's not just a training program, Marin replied. It's the foundation. Every new agent, every old one, everyone who stands between a person and a plane, they'll learn how to see, not just scan. He nodded. That's good. She kept typing. After a moment, he said, You gonna keep that email? She didn't answer right away. Then, yeah. Why? She looked him in the eye. Because one day someone's going to ask how we got here, and I want to show them exactly what we had to push through to move forward. And with that, she saved the document, shut the laptop, and stood up straighter. Some threats weren't meant to scare. Some were meant to confirm you were finally doing something that mattered. The hallway leading to the executive floor of Verta Air's Atlanta headquarters always smelled like filtered air and dry carpet glue. Marin had walked it hundreds of times, usually with a clipboard, sometimes with a speech in her head. But today her hands were empty. No tablet, no note cards. Just a purpose that felt heavier than any presentation she'd ever given. She stepped into the boardroom. Long table, leather chairs, tall glass windows framing the city in all its summer haze. Half the board was already there. Some familiar faces, others newer, more polished, with hands that hadn't shaken in years. Jared Sloan, the head of corporate relations, stood as she entered. Tall, white-haired, practiced smile. His tone was measured. "Marin," he said, "we appreciate you coming in on short notice." "I wasn't far," she replied calmly, taking the open seat at the far end. Another board member leaned in. "There's considerable noise around the gate incident. It's escalated beyond standard HR review." Marin nodded. "It should." Jared cleared his throat. "We're also receiving inquiries from the Department of Transportation, Civil Rights Division. It's not just press anymore. It's policy." She waited. "We're asking for your cooperation in de-escalating," he continued. "We believe a carefully worded public statement of regret could go a long way. Something neutral. Something that doesn't point fingers at the company." Marin didn't blink. "You want me to say it was unfortunate, but isolated?" "That would be helpful," Jared said, as if it were obvious. She leaned forward slightly. "It wasn't isolated. And if it was, it's because we built a system where things like this are isolated, quiet, unchallenged, and swept aside." Someone at the other end of the table shifted uncomfortably. A woman with an HR badge tapped a pen against her notepad. Jared tried again. "Marin, we're not questioning the importance of what happened." "Good," she cut in, "because I'm about to show you how deep it goes." She opened her folder and slid a printed report across the table. It was simple, clean, but the title stood out in bold. Internal Categorization. Protocol, Gate Agents, Tier 1, Risk Indicators. The air in the room changed. "What is this?" someone asked, flipping through the first few pages. "A breakdown," Marin said, "of how our unspoken algorithm, our so-called behavioral flagging, has led to consistent over-surveillance of passengers who fit certain profiles. Mostly black, often young, frequently traveling alone." Another board member looked up. "This was never approved by us." "It didn't need approval," she said. "It evolved, quietly, through internal culture, vague guidelines, unchecked assumptions. It's been embedded into training materials, flagged checklists, and reinforced by gate agents who are told to trust their gut. But their gut was trained by patterns, and those patterns are biased." Jared stared at the papers, unmoving. "This is dangerous," he said. "It's true," she corrected. He stood, pacing slowly. "If this gets out—" "It is getting out," Marin said, "because I'm going to make sure of it." A thick silence dropped over the room. One of the newer members, a woman, mid-40s, Latina, who hadn't said much all meeting, spoke up. "I saw the footage," she said softly. "I watched the little girl clutch that note like it was armor. I have a daughter that age." No one interrupted. She looked around the table. "We can't keep talking about liability. We need to talk about integrity." Marin nodded once. Then she opened her laptop and connected it to the screen at the head of the room. A video played, surveillance footage from Gate G9. No dramatic music, no edits. Just a quiet girl stepping forward, handing over her ticket, and a woman tearing it in half without ever checking her name. When the screen went black, no one moved. Marin said one final thing before standing. "I didn't come here to protect a brand. I came to protect people, especially the ones we make invisible." And she walked out, leaving the room full of executives to sit with the image of a child who hadn't raised her voice, but had been heard anyway. Back in her office, Marin shut the door behind her with a soft click. The room felt different now. It used to be a place of strategy and control. High-backed chair, framed awards, city skylines stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. But today it felt like a witness stand. She sat at her desk, exhaled, and opened the encrypted email again. It was from someone she hadn't heard from in nearly a decade. Claire Dunleavy, a former HR analyst from the security division. They hadn't spoken since the merger. Claire had always been quiet, observant, someone who noticed the fine print others skimmed past. Marin clicked the attachment. It was a spreadsheet, thousands of rows, names, dates, flight numbers, and a final column labeled Flagged, Tier 1 Passenger Risk Indicators. Her eyes scanned down. Most of the names had something in common. They were overwhelmingly black, or Latino, or had surnames that sounded foreign to the system. Many were minors. Many had printed their tickets at home. Many traveled alone. Her hand gripped the edge of the desk when she found it. Row 864. Callister, Nia. Age, 11. Backpack noted. Printed ticket at home. Traveling solo. Flagged. Her daughter had been flagged before she even reached the gate. It wasn't just Janice Holbrook's judgment. It was an algorithm, a quiet bias baked into the bones of a system that claimed to be about safety, but had been trained over time to fear faces like hers, like Nia's. Marin sat back, not in shock, but in clarity. They built this. She had helped build it, brick by brick, memo by memo, by letting silence settle in the meetings where this sort of quiet sorting was passed off as procedure. And now it had circled back. Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but it was Nia's camp number. She picked up, trying to steady her voice. "Hi, sweet girl." Nia's voice was light, bubbly. "We just finished making little clay cities. Mine has a bridge that connects all the rooftops. Like no streets, just skyways. I called it Skybridge." Marin felt something shift in her chest. "That sounds beautiful." "Are you okay?" Nia asked, not because she sensed anything wrong, but because she always asked, like Marin did with her. "I am," she lied gently. "You sound happy." "I am." They talked for another minute. Nia's world now was full of art projects and bunkmates and snack swaps, a whole place untouched by what had happened at Gate G9. Before hanging up, Nia said, "Hey, Mom?" "Yeah?" "I brought the note with me, the one you wrote." Marin closed her eyes. "Good." "I didn't show it to anyone. I just held it when I needed to." After the call ended, Marin stared at her laptop screen. The list hadn't changed. The rows were still there. But now it felt like every cell glowed with a quiet accusation. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She opened a new email and typed to the entire executive team. "I am no longer asking for support. I am informing you that a full audit will begin next week. The risk indicator protocol will be suspended immediately, and a third-party review will be announced publicly." She paused, then added, "And if this jeopardizes my position, so be it. But at least I'll know my daughter, and every child who looks like her, will not be flagged for simply showing up." She hit send. Outside her window, the sky was beginning to turn gold. Planes lifted in the distance, small and steady. Some passengers on those flights would feel safe without knowing why. Others would be holding on to something invisible just to feel like they belonged. Marin sat with that, and for the first time all day, she let herself feel the weight of both the mother and the builder she had become. The sound of voices outside the press room was low but constant, a soft, shifting hum of reporters murmuring, chairs creaking, camera crews adjusting tripods. There were lights too, brighter than they needed to be, harsh enough to blur faces and wash out nerves. Marin stood behind the curtain still for a moment. She wore no pin, no title badge, just a navy blouse, slacks, and the same quiet fire in her chest that had been burning since the day at Gate G9. Her assistant waited just outside the door with a clipboard, but Marin had waved off any prepared remarks. This wasn't going to be a press event. This was a reckoning. When she stepped to the podium, the room hushed. Cameras clicked to life. A few reporters sat forward, notepads in hand. Others had their phones out, live streaming, already framing her as either hero or threat. She didn't smile. "My name is Marin Callister," she began, her voice clear, not loud. "Some of you know me as the former CEO of Verta Air. Some of you may only know me as the mother of the 11-year-old girl whose boarding pass was torn at Gate G9 last week." Silence. "I'm standing here today not to protect a company and not to demand justice for one child. I'm here because what happened to my daughter isn't rare. It's routine. It's just usually quieter." She looked down at her notes, one line scribbled on the top. "Say it like you mean it." "I've reviewed internal data going back 5 years. Over 70% of flagged passengers under our risk protocols are people of color. Many of them minors. Many of them like my daughter, traveling alone, with backpacks, printed boarding passes, and calm voices that still aren't heard." A reporter raised her hand. "Are you saying this was a company-wide policy?" Marin shook her head. "Number, I'm saying it was a culture. And culture can be more dangerous than policy because it hides behind the illusion of procedure." Another reporter asked, "What's the company doing now?" Marin's expression didn't change. They've asked me to step down. A ripple moved through the room. But before I go, she continued, I'm launching a new program, not as an executive, as a mother, as a passenger, as a woman who's been 12 years old and told she didn't look like she belonged. She clicked a remote in her hand. A new logo appeared on the screen behind her. Look again. No one should have to earn their humanity at the gate. Starting next quarter, this training will be mandatory for all gate agents across our terminals. It won't be a slide deck. It will be stories, real passengers, real mistakes, and most importantly, real listening. Someone from the back called out, "Do you think this will fix things?" "No," she said without hesitation, "but it's where we begin." She scanned the room, then stepped back from the mic. In the second row, a boy no older than 10 sat beside a woman, maybe his grandmother. He raised his hand, small and hesitant. Marin pointed to him gently. He stood, voice wavering but clear. "If I print my ticket at home, will they still stop me?" Marin stepped down from the stage, walked slowly toward him, and knelt. She didn't answer right away. She looked him in the eyes. "Maybe," she said honestly, "but next time someone might stand beside you. Someone who knows better. Someone who saw what they missed before." He nodded, eyes wide. "Maybe," she added, "that someone will be you." And in that moment, under the weight of camera lenses and notepads and long-held silence, it wasn't about a scandal or a press cycle. It was about a boy who asked a question and the room that listened. 2 hours later, Marin stood in the quiet of her office, watching the sky bruise slowly with twilight. From up here, planes moved like careful insects, smooth, predictable, distant. But down below, the ground was shifting. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the press conference. The headlines were already out. Ex-CEO exposes hidden bias protocols at major airline. Marin Callister steps down, launches Look Again initiative. Gate G9, one child's boarding pass sparks a nationwide review. It wasn't just the media. Emails poured in, some full of gratitude, some accusing her of betrayal. Investors were nervous. Advocacy groups were hopeful. The internet, as always, was split. She closed the blinds. Then came the knock. Jared Sloan entered without waiting. His suit was perfect. Tie slightly loosened, the way executives do when they want to appear human. He carried a folder, but it might as well have been a sword. "Marin," he said, "I'm going to be straight with you." "That would be new," she replied calmly. He didn't flinch. "The board met this afternoon. They want you to take an indefinite leave. No termination, just distance." "I already offered my resignation." "They haven't accepted yet." She looked at him. "What's the condition?" "That you stop pushing this. Quietly hand off the Look Again program. Let PR spin this into a forward-thinking diversity effort and let someone else be the face." Marin didn't speak right away. He continued, "You're making it too personal, too emotional." She laughed under her breath. "A child had her dignity torn in half at the gate. What exactly would the correct amount of emotion be?" Jared set the folder on her desk. "I'm trying to save your legacy. I'm trying to save future passengers." A long pause, then she added, "I'll step away. On my terms. But Look Again stays. Fully funded, fully implemented. With my name on it." Jared exhaled. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "No," she said, stepping toward the window. "I'm finally making it honest." Outside, the last light of day caught on the wings of a departing plane. As Jared turned to leave, he hesitated. "You've lit a fire, Marin. Just make sure you don't burn down the house with it." She didn't turn around. "Maybe it's time we build a better one." After he left, she walked to her shelf and pulled down the photo Nia had drawn years ago. It was faded, edges curled, two stick figures on a runway, holding hands with clouds overhead. She placed it on her desk beside the new boarding pass printout from Gate G9. One showed who they used to be. The other reminded her why that had to change. The door opened again, this time quietly. Janice Holbrook stood there. No badge, no blazer, just a woman holding something tightly in her hand. "I wanted to give this back," Janice said, her voice rough. She extended a folded piece of paper. Marin recognized it immediately. The original boarding pass, taped back together, gently pressed inside a plastic sleeve. Marin took it, surprised. Janice swallowed. I kept it after the investigation. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe because it made me look at things I didn't want to see. She paused. I didn't come to argue, just to say, I'm listening now. Marin met her eyes. That's a start, she said. Janice nodded, turned to go, and then stopped. The girl, your daughter, she never yelled. She just looked at me like she'd already been through it before. Marin's voice softened. Because she had. When the door closed again, Marin sat down slowly. She opened her laptop, drafted one last memo, not to the board, not to the press, to the future, to whoever came next. Let the gate be more than a checkpoint. Let it be a moment to choose better. Every single time, she hit save. And somewhere above, in the hush between departure and arrival, a girl in 2A leaned against a window, tracing clouds with her finger, unaware that her quiet had just started something far louder. Marin stood alone in a quiet corner of LaGuardia's Terminal D, the older section, where the tiles didn't shine as much and the walls held a kind of memory. Not the kind people frame or post about, the kind that lingers. There, between two vending machines and an unused security checkpoint, stood Gate 12B, long retired, no flights, no announcements, just a silent marker of something that once was. She stepped closer, the air still and oddly cool. The gate was blocked by a single nylon strap, faded lettering barely visible. Beyond it, the closed glass doors overlooked a jet bridge that no longer connected to anything. It was here, decades ago, where she had been pulled aside at 12. Same age as Nia, same summer heat, same knot in her chest. She had been flying alone then, too. First time. Backpack, sketch pad, hand-me-down sneakers. Her ticket had been real. Her fear had been ignored. I'm sorry, but we need to verify something, the agent had said back then. Voice just polite enough to sound reasonable. She hadn't known what to say, so she said nothing, and they took her aside anyway. Now, standing in front of that very door, Marin found herself breathing slower. The years hadn't dulled the details. They had sharpened them. The way the room had tilted slightly, the eyes that wouldn't meet hers, the weight of being told without words that she didn't belong. It wasn't the worst day of her life. It wasn't even loud. That was the point. It had just stayed. Behind her footsteps, she turned. It was Victor Sosa, clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled up, expression less formal than usual. I figured I might find you here, he said. You okay? She gave a tired smile. This gate hasn't changed a bit. He glanced at the rusted edge of the old door. No one flies from here anymore. They shut it down after the terminal remodel, but it's still in the system. Of course it is, she said. Some things just hide better. Victor hesitated. We pulled the footage from that day. G9. There's more. Passengers who stepped aside, who watched and said nothing. It's not just about the agent anymore. I know, she said, and I don't want revenge. I want awareness. He handed her a paper. The civil rights audit is moving forward. Federal. It'll be public. Marin took the page, scanned it, then folded it without comment. Victor waited, then added, Holbrook signed on to complete the entire Look Again pilot. No resistance. She's quieter. Marin nodded. She should be. They stood there a while. Then Victor asked, Why this gate? Because this is where I learned that silence doesn't mean safety, she said. It means no one's watching, and no one's helping. He didn't argue. She looked out through the glass, where nothing waited, no plane, no passengers, just a hallway that led nowhere now. But it didn't end here, she said. No, he agreed. It began here. Marin turned and walked away slowly, leaving the gate behind, not forgotten, but no longer holding her. Back at Camp River Pine, a light breeze stirred the trees as Nia sat beneath the shade of an old pine. Her sketch pad lay open on her lap, pencil moving slowly. She wasn't drawing clouds. She was drawing a girl standing in front of a closed gate, but this time the gate had a sign above it. See me first. The door wasn't open yet, but the girl was waiting, not afraid, just ready. 3 weeks later, the new gate opened with little fanfare. No ribbon cutting, no news crews, Just a modest crowd of staff, trainees, and a few quiet observers leaning on the railings nearby. Gate G9 had been redesigned, not the walls or layout, but something deeper, its purpose, its message. Above the boarding doors, a new sign was installed in brushed bronze. G9, Gateway to Awareness. Inside, the walls had changed too. Gone were the dull corporate posters about upgrades and mileage points. In their place were framed sketches, children's drawings, portraits of faces, doors, clouds, and messages written in bold block letters. Do better, see me first, we belong here too. And just outside the waiting area, a new small desk had been added. Quiet, simple, a place labeled Reflection Station. No forms, no policies. Just a note that read, if you saw something today that made you pause, write it down. We'll read it, we'll listen. Myron stood to the side, watching, not dressed in power colors, not giving a speech. Just there, in the background, like she'd planned. The first cohort of gate agents in the Look Again program were present, clipboards in hand, listening to the lead facilitator. A woman Myron had personally trained. A woman who had once flagged a child just like Nia, and now stood teaching others how to unlearn what they'd never meant to learn in the first place. Janice Holbrook was there too. She didn't wear the uniform anymore. She wore a light cardigan and flat shoes, and her hair was looser. She wasn't there to be celebrated. She was there to remember. She stood in front of the trainees now, holding a laminated boarding pass. This, she said, lifting it slightly, is the pass I tore up. A mistake I made because I thought I was following protocol, but I wasn't. I was following a pattern I never questioned. The room was silent. I didn't lose my job, she continued, but I lost something. I lost the illusion that I could do this work without constantly checking the lens I was looking through. She handed the pass to the trainer. Now I teach through that mistake, not around it. Myron stepped forward when the session ended. Janice noticed, but didn't flinch. I didn't think you'd be here, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd come back, Myron replied. Janice looked down. I wanted to disappear. Myron shook her head. Disappearing is easy. Owning the moment takes more. Janice looked at the group packing up their things. Young faces, nervous energy. Do you think they'll get it? She asked. They don't have to yet, Myron said. They just have to start. The gate opened soon after, the first real flight in weeks boarding from the new space. Among the passengers was a girl no older than Nia, traveling alone, holding her boarding pass with two hands. The new agent bent slightly, smiled warmly and said, What's your name, sweetheart? The girl answered. The agent scanned the pass, then bent a little lower. Window seat, huh? I think you'll like what you see up there. The girl smiled and walked through. Janice watched. So did Myron. They didn't speak, but something passed between them. A moment not of forgiveness, but of reckoning, of weight being carried instead of cast off. As the boarding door closed, Myron stepped away from the gate, not in retreat, in quiet victory. Because this wasn't the end of a scandal. It was the start of a shift. And sometimes all it takes is one person choosing to see for the entire system to blink awake. The ride from the campgrounds to the airport took just under 2 hours. Nia stared out the window most of the way, watching the blur of trees and power lines roll by like scenery in one of her drawings. She didn't talk much. She didn't need to. In her lap sat her sketch pad, zipped into the front pouch of her backpack, and on her wrist, a friendship bracelet she'd made for herself. Pale blue and violet thread, knotted just right. The camp counselor sitting beside her glanced over. You nervous? Nia shrugged. Not really. You were quiet at lunch, the counselor said gently, but your speech, that was something. Nia looked down. I just said what I felt. Well, it hit, the counselor smiled. The part about airports being like test questions. Some kids get judged before they even write their name. That stayed with me. Nia nodded. She didn't say it for applause. She'd said it because it was true. When they pulled up to the terminal, a staff member with a clipboard met them by the curb. Myron was already waiting, leaning casually against a pillar with one hand in her pocket, eyes scanning for her daughter. She didn't rush. She didn't wave wildly. But the second Nia stepped out of the van, she straightened. Just a little. They hugged without words. Marn stepped back and took her in. You grew, Nia grinned. I think it was the pancakes. On the way to baggage claim, they didn't talk about the gate, or the news stories, or the program. Instead, Nia asked about a pigeon that had nested on their apartment's windowsill. Marin asked about cabin pranks and who snored the loudest. Only when they sat waiting for the luggage carousel to roll did Nia shift topics. You think they'll fire her? She asked. Marin blinked. Who? That woman, Nia said. From the airport. Marin considered. I don't know. Nia swung her legs slowly. I don't think I want them to. That surprised her mother. No? Nia shook her head. I want her to remember what she did, what it felt like when everyone watched and no one helped. Marin nodded slowly. People don't learn much when you just erase them. They learn when they have to see what they didn't see before. That's what I told the kids at camp, Nia said, about drawing. You don't just look once. You keep looking. You notice more. Marin smiled, pulling a small envelope from her purse. Something came for you while you were gone. She handed it to Nia. Inside was a card from the airport supervisor, Victor Sosa, handwritten. Nia, we're building new ways of seeing because of what you showed us. Keep drawing. We're looking now. V.S. Nia folded the note gently and tucked it inside her sketchpad without a word. The luggage carousel groaned to life, bags thumping down one by one. Marin spotted Nia's duffel first, bright purple, a ribbon still tied to the handle. She picked it up and handed it off. As they walked toward the exit, Nia glanced at a nearby gate. A girl about her age was standing alone, nervously clinging to a boarding pass. A gate agent crouched down and smiled. Marin noticed the look on Nia's face. You okay? She asked. Nia nodded. Yeah, I think that girl's going to be all right. You're sure? No, Nia said, but maybe she won't have to be alone next time. And with that, they stepped through the automatic doors into the late afternoon sun, where the air was thick and real, and no one needed a pass to belong. Back home in Harlem, the living room was filled with the quiet rustle of unpacking. Zippers, the crinkle of paper, the thump of shoes hitting the floor one by one. Nia had spread her sketch pad out on the coffee table, flipping through the pages like they were old letters. Her mom sat nearby, nursing a mug of ginger tea, one hand resting on her cheek as she watched. Outside, the evening light dipped lower. The hum of the city was soft now, just enough to remind them they weren't alone, but quiet enough to feel like the world had slowed for a breath. Nia stopped on the final page of her pad. Marin leaned forward. That new? Yeah, Nia said. I drew it last night before bed. It was a picture of a boarding gate, not like the old ones. This one was open, really open. Wide doors, sunlight pouring through. Above it, in careful block letters, all welcome. Below the sign, people stood in line. Every shape, every size, every shade. Some smiled, some looked unsure, but they were together, side by side. Near the front stood a girl with a backpack and purple beads. Her boarding pass wasn't torn. Marin took a long breath. Not because she was sad, because she knew this was what it had all been for. She reached into the drawer beside the couch and pulled something out, a small plastic sleeve. Inside it was the original boarding pass, still creased, still whole in spirit. Nia looked at it and smiled. You kept it? I'm keeping it close, Marin said. Not to carry the pain, to carry the purpose. Nia ran her fingers along the edges of the plastic. You think people will change? Marin didn't answer right away. She looked out the window at the sky above the buildings, where planes were probably crisscrossing in the distance, carrying strangers to somewhere new. I think people are already changing, she said, because of kids like you. Nia looked down at the drawing again. I want to work at an airport someday. Marin smiled. As a pilot? Nia shook her head. Number I want to work at the gate. The desk. Marin tilted her head. Why the desk? Because that's where people decide what kind of flight it's going to be. That landed harder than either of them expected. Marin stood and gently placed the old boarding pass into the back of Nia's sketch pad. You're going to do good thing, she said. I want to do different things, Nia replied. Better things. They hugged then, longer than usual, the kind where no one says anything, but everything is said. Later that night, Marin sat alone at her desk. Her inbox was overflowing. The Look Again initiative had been picked up by two other airlines. A civil rights group had asked her to consult on new national policy for minor travel. The board had accepted her resignation. But none of that was what she was thinking about. She opened a blank document, typed slowly. This isn't about planes. It's about the ground we choose to walk on before we ever take off. It's about how we greet each other, how we see each other, and who we trust to carry us through the sky. She hit save. Then she closed the laptop, turned off the desk lamp, and let the stillness settle. Somewhere across the apartment, Nia slept with her sketch pad on the nightstand. On the inside cover, she had written something new in pencil, just beneath the first note her mom had ever given her. It read, "Learn to look again, then never stop." The city hummed on. The clouds moved without judgment. And this time, neither of them was flying alone. Sometimes change doesn't come from the loudest voices in the room. It comes from the quiet strength of a little girl holding a torn boarding pass, refusing to shrink. This story reminds us that dignity shouldn't depend on your seat, your skin, or whether someone decides you belong. So, let us ask you this. Have you ever felt unseen in a place where you were supposed to feel safe? Drop your story in the comments. Let's listen to each other. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next, because we're just getting started.